The first jolt knocked a coffee mug off my tiny sink and sent it spinning into the dog's water bowl, where it landed with a bell sound that didn't belong to morning. My RV lurched a second time, harder, and the whole house on wheels complained as if the bones of it remembered every mountain pass we'd ever crossed together. I tumbled from the dinette, barefoot, still wearing the t-shirt I'd fallen asleep in, and yanked the shade. There she was at the end of my driveway, planted like a flag where driveway meets gravel lane. Hips squared, chin cocked, sunglasses the size of a grudge. HOA Karen wore victory like perfume and shouted orders into the humid air, while a tow operator in a reflective vest backed his rig toward my hitch. "Move it," she yelled as if volume were law. Something clanged under my floor, the hook, the chain, a decision pretending to be fate. I pressed my palm to the window and yelled, "I'm inside." The tow operator turned, startled enough to show a human face beneath the tired. Karen didn't flinch. "Liar," she said, a word she loved because it made everyone else smaller. "He leaves it here for days," she added to the operator, waving at my concrete pad like it was a crime scene instead of the spot I poured with my brother last spring. 2 loads of mix and a sunburn that lasted through June. Her SUV idled behind the tow truck, bumper close to my hitch with a chain looped from her front tow hook to my rear stabilizer bar insurance. She'd say later, to make sure I couldn't flee. I thought about the chain first as a hazard and then, with a click that felt a lot like resolve, as a leash she'd given me to pull her power into daylight. I cracked the door and stepped out with both hands high, phone already dialing. My land, I told dispatch, calm as I could make it. 1128 Marigold Lane. I'm in my RV. Tow is in progress. I did not consent. The dispatcher's voice had the steadiness of a good bridge. "Stay where you are, sir. Deputies are en route." I could see the tow operator now, young in that way that mixes shoulder muscle with apology, eyes flicking between me and the clipboard where Karen's paperwork waited like a trap. "You can't tow an occupied vehicle," I said, "and hey, I rent this pad month to month from myself because I own it. City permits for accessory dwelling use. Last inspection passed." Her lips pinched. "This is Timbercrest Estates," she announced to the morning, "and no one can dwell in RVs. We gave you notices. Final warning was yesterday." A paper fluttered against my gate like a wounded bird. The date stamped on it was 3 days old, the hour typed in wrong, the signature a scribble that looked like it had been traced from a cartoon. I lifted my phone toward the tow operator and zoomed on the placard I'd bolted to a cedar stake by the driveway, a small, stubborn sign I'd wood-burned myself the night the first courtesy notice slid under my wiper blades. "Private pad not HOA permitted." He read it and his jaw worked like he was chewing a thought he didn't want to swallow. "You have no jurisdiction here," I said to Karen, quieter than the generator humming in the distance and somehow heavier. "My parcel was never annexed. The city map shows it clear as daylight. You send letters because letters are cheap and fear is cheaper." She glared at the tow operator like he'd betrayed an oath. "Hook it," she said, "or we'll find a company that knows how to follow orders." I saw what she was betting on: the fatigue of men whose days are measured in miles and metal, the pressure of a morning schedule, the easy bully of a clipboard. My dog, Scout, pressed against my calf, trembling. I set my free hand on his head and breathed the way the VA counselor taught me, in through the nose, hold out slow. The tow operator looked at me, then at the RV, then at the chain Karen had looped badlathruff my stabilizer. "You can't attach that there," I said, not unkindly. "It's not designed for pull. You'll bend the frame and then what?" She smiled with her teeth. "Then you'll learn," she said, like a mother who never learned how to love without punishing. My counterpunch arrived as 4 white letters rolling through heat shimmer on the hood of a county cruiser. Deputy Ford stepped out. Aisha, the same Aisha who once held a C-spine for my wife at a midnight wreck, the same Aisha whose laugh could turn a riot into a potluck and took in the tableau like a painter deciding where to place light. "Morning, folks," she said. "Who's got the paperwork for this?" Karen pinwheeled laminated pages like a showgirl. "Community standards. Board resolution. Habitability code." Aisha read without hurry, her eyes soft but exacting. Then she scanned the pin-drop survey map I'd printed and kept in a weatherproof sleeve by the cedar stake, leaned down to read the permit number stamped on my electrical pedestal, and took a long look at Karen's chain looped through my RV stabilizer like a noose around a wrist. "Ma'am," she said to Karen, "you cannot order a tow of an occupied vehicle on private property, especially property outside your association, and you cannot restrain someone's movement with a chain. That's getting close to a false imprisonment issue. Remove it." Karen's chin ticked up as if pride could rest on bone. "He's not moving," she said. "He's in violation. We voted." Aisha breathed in patience like oxygen and clicked her radio once. "Send a second unit. Also, please notify City Code that I'd like a confirmation on accessory dwelling permit number 6817. 10-4, the radio answered, a voice as tired as August. The tow operator unhooked the truck's winch cable but left the chain Karen had thrown on me. Old habit made me track angles and distances, force and consequence. Aisha turned to me, voice pitched low to keep the match off the fuse. "Sir, can you safely secure your vehicle?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then I suggest you do." To Karen, she said, "You will wait for code enforcement to clarify jurisdiction. You don't get to fill the gap with noise." Karen's followers, 2 board members in polos the exact color of complacency, showed up with phones already recording, ready to harvest outrage. "He's been warned," one said. "We're just enforcing." The other chimed in, "We have a contract with this tow company." The operator stiffened. "We're month to month," he corrected in a murmur, "and we follow state law." Aisha gave him a look that wasn't unkind. "Then follow it now." Here's where the twist stepped out of the heat like a mirage and became real. A second vehicle rolled to the curb, but it wasn't code enforcement and it wasn't another deputy. It was a white pickup with a state seal I'd only ever seen on my truck registration. Inside was a woman with a tablet and a gaze like clean metal. "Morning, deputy," she said to Aisha. "State DMV investigations. We've been working a predatory towing tip for Timbercrest. Thought we might swing by." She turned to the tow operator with a half smile that read less like threat, more like chance. "Ethan, right? Your dispatcher flagged this. Appreciate your cooperation." Ethan, that was the tow operator's name, sagged just enough to look 22 again. "We got told it was common area," he said. She jerked a thumb at Karen. "She told my boss the board owns the lane." The investigator tapped her tablet. "Your boss also billed 3 times last month for tows from parcels outside the CC and RS," she said. "And somebody in this chain has been padding storage hours." She looked at Karen as if truth were a mirror Karen avoided. "We're gonna sort this out. So we'll need everyone to stay exactly in the lanes the law painted." Aisha's radio crackled. "Code enforcement. Permit 6817 is valid and current. Accessory dwelling use compliant. Inspections passed last month. No violations." Aisha thanked them and wrote it down on the hood of her cruiser, pen moving like the pen knew it had a purpose beyond ink. Karen's face went hot with the color people get when the story in their head meets the facts outside it and tries to punch through. She turned to Ethan, doubled down because doubling down was the only exercise she liked. "Hook it anyway," she hissed. "The homeowners obstructing an enforcement action." Ethan didn't move. The investigator spoke gently to him like she'd chosen, on purpose, to be the one adult who wouldn't make him choose between his job and the law. "You can roll out," she said. "We'll talk at your shop later." That's when Karen made the mistake that turned a bad morning into a record. She stormed to her idling SUV and grabbed the chain she'd looped, yanking it taut as if indignation were a winch. "If he won't come to us, we'll bring him," she growled. She stomped toward my hitch and started to tie the chain higher, clipping through the gap in my rear bumper with a snap like a threat. Aisha stepped forward, palms up. "Stop." Karen didn't. She turned her back to the deputy and threw one more loop, set the hook and tugged, satisfied with the clink. "All right then," I said, "to no one and to everyone." I glanced at Aisha, and she read the calculation in my face like she'd seen it before in 100 different contexts where standing still is the loudest thing you can do. "Safely," she said. "Slowly." I stepped into the RV, closed the door, slid the deadbolt, slid a wedge under the cupboard so the pans wouldn't clatter, and turned the key. The engine coughed awake, familiar and stubborn. A diesel voice that remembered Wyoming, remembered rain, remembered how to be steady. Karen was at my bumper, chain in fist like a parade marshal's baton. The world outside narrowed to 3 mirrors and a line I could honor. I pressed the brake, shifted into drive, and crept forward until the chain kissed straight. Scout braced his paws and watched me like a kid on a roller coaster who trusts the operator by faith alone. The chain stretched, went taut, and Karen's SUV rolled. Caught, rolled again, tires chirping, bumper lowering slightly as the slack burned to law. 5 feet, 10, 15. I kept it at a crawl. Aisha walked beside the SUV, one hand up to keep neighbors from doing neighborly dumb things, the other on the radio calling for a supervisor because someone had dragged us all into a story she wanted documented line by line. The chain sang. The SUV rolled, engine still idling in drive, moving without choosing. Karen scrambled to keep her footing and then, wisely, stepped away, rage flaring like a match snuffed by breath. The HOA board members filmed, narrating their heartbreak into their lenses as if that would tilt the scale. We made it to the cul-de-sac circle where the HOA once dreamed of a gate, and I eased to a stop. The SUV settled on the chain with a patient sigh. I set the brake, engine idling low, and waited for the room to fill with consequence. It arrived in a string of simple statements. Aisha, ma'am, you are under arrest for interfering with an investigation, reckless endangerment, and attempted unlawful towing of an occupied vehicle. The investigator will be freezing the tow account pending audit. Please preserve your communications. Ethan, with relief loosing his shoulders. Copy that. I'll wait here for my supervisor. A neighbor arriving late to the show. What happened? Someone answered. She tried to tow a man with himself still in it, and he took her for a ride. The joke wasn't cruel. It was a coping mechanism for a street learning that rules are supposed to protect, not punish. It didn't end with a click of cuffs and a chain gone slack. It turned into paperwork and consequence, the twin engines that actually move a county. The state charged Karen with false imprisonment and reckless endangerment. The city cited her for unlawful interference with a permitted accessory dwelling. The DMV investigations unit opened a predatory towing case that reached into emails where she'd pressured dispatchers with phrases like board authority and community safety until the words had no meaning left except control. The HOA board held an emergency meeting under string lights and fear and voted to remove her as president. She refused. They removed her anyway. At the hearing a week later, a judge with a voice like a calm river issued a protective order requiring her to stay 200 feet from my property and from any tow activity in the city until the case concluded. She cried then, a sound that didn't know how to be soft, and said she only wanted standards. The judge said standards without humanity are just sticks. I filed a civil suit not to break her, but to fix the shape of things. The settlement arrived 3 months later with checks written by insurance companies that discovered the price of arrogance. Paid for the rear bumper the chain had scuffed. It paid for a legal clinic I now host twice a month at the old HOA clubhouse, where neighbors come with their questions and leave with copies of the city code highlighted in bright green, where rights and responsibilities live side by side. It paid for a new wooden sign at my driveway, the cedar planed smooth, the letters burned deep by a patient hand. Respect boundaries, ask before you act. People stop and take pictures. Sometimes they leave notes tucked under the rock by the post. Most say thank you. A few say sorry. One was from Ethan, who quit predatory rotations and got on with a company that only does city contracts. He wrote that he sleeps better. I believe him. That twist you were waiting for, the unexpected person who changes the math, wasn't the investigator with the tablet or even Deputy Aisha with her radio and her patients. It was Mrs. Alvarez from 3 houses down, the woman who waters her porch geraniums at dawn and knows everyone's grandkids' names. She walked up to my RV the week after the hearing with a folder of photos she'd taken, the kind only a neighbor could. Time-stamped shots of Karen measuring my driveway with a cloth tape at midnight, of her slipping notices under my wiper blades on days the city office was closed, of her SUV in the tow yard after other board-authorized adventures. Mrs. Alvarez had been silent because she hates conflict, because she grew up in a time and a place where the loudest person often won, because she thought the law was a club she didn't belong to. She looked at the wooden sign, then at me, then at the folder she'd held like a secret. I don't want to be on a side, she said, but I want to be on the side of right. We sat on my RV steps and looked through the pictures, and it felt like a community slowly teaching itself to tell the truth without shouting. I didn't keep the chain. I gave it to the city's training class as a prop for their de-escalation course. A tangle of links that says here's how fast a morning can turn if you skip listening. Karen's end wasn't cinematic. She took a plea on the misdemeanors, paid fines, served community service at the food bank 3 Saturdays in a row where she had to ask people what they needed and then hand it to them without commentary, a skill she'd never learned in all her years writing bylaws. She moved to a condo across town where the HOA has no towing power without police presence and where, if rumor is true, she now mines the library in the lobby and reshelves books like a penance. I hope she keeps one out on her table about boundaries and a second about grace. As for me, I still sleep in the RV on cool nights because the rain on the roof sounds like forgiveness, and Scout still gets nervous when heavy engines idle nearby. But he calms when I touch his ear and say, "You're home. Buddy, we're not moving unless we choose to." Neighbors wave more now, and some of them stop long enough to tell me their stories about notices that felt like threats, about rules that felt like sticks, about the day they realized they could ask questions instead of bracing for impact. The old clubhouse where Karen once practiced speeches now hosts a Tuesday night Know Your Code circle, where we read ordinances together and argue and laugh and figure out how to live near each other without chains. So that's the tale. A heavy-set HOA president tried to have me towed while I was inside my own permitted RV, and when she chained her SUV to my frame to force the issue, I drove slowly, safely, and pulled the truth into daylight with her authority literally attached to the back of my life. Deputies showed. An investigator showed, neighbors showed, and the law, not the loudest voice, had the last word. Would you have done what I did? Or was I wrong to inch forward and make it all visible? What do you think?